Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We are Baltimore Positive, positively getting you through this Kansas City week and purple therapy that we've been doing here. We're going to be doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour presented by the Maryland Lottery soon. I don't have any dates for next week, but it's coming up. They're waiting for me over at Costas. I got to get back down to Fadley's. No playoff baseball down at Fadley's at Lexington Market. And if there were, maybe I'd be inviting this guy. He hails from Cincinnati, but has made his life in Kansas City. He owns WHP Radio out there. He is a former all-star reliever, Kiss makeup fan, and rocker. I wore my Geddy Lee Major League Baseball shirt. Can you believe that the all-star game you pitched in here, Jeff Montgomery, 1993, 32 years ago now, you, me, and Geddy Lee had a little campfire down there over Oak, Canada. How you been, man?
Doing great. That shirt brings back so many memories. I've talked so many times about that All-Star game, and it was interesting because of Geddy Lee sang the Canadian anthem. And we were opening up in Toronto after the All-Star game. So Geddy, being there and having known Geddy, invited me to fly back up. We went to flight up to Toronto together. So it's pretty cool spending some time with him and his family. My wife Tina was with me, so it was a really cool experience. And gosh, that really brings back so many memories. You talk about the Kiss photos, and I remember it was after opening day when you're in Baltimore. We went to the Kiss concert, but what I remember about that is I had a few too many. I don't know if it was Budweisers or Bud Lights at the time, but I had a few too many cocktails at that concert. The next day, I gave up a home run to someone in the Orioles and ended up blowing the save there. So good memories and bad memories from both
I
Rush and
remember
Geddy
the Kiss
Lee.
show. I saw you at the Kiss show. If it were the
Yeah.
modern era, we'd have pictures because we would have had phones together. But they were spray painting faces like you and Gubazon, a bunch of the guys like
Oh yeah.
dressed up like Kiss, right?
We
Literally.
did it. Yeah.
Well, old rock and roll hearts. And I'll just say this before we get into baseball and football. And I'm having you on because it's Kansas City week, but like you've been embedded with the baseball team. So we're going to talk Bobby Witt. We're going to talk different things like that. But the Geddy Lee thing, he did a sit down with with Dan Rather on, Dan sat with all the rock stars and he went to Getty's house. Getty has an incredible baseball collection, the Negro Baseball Hall of Fame
Yeah.
museum in Kansas City, all the baseballs that are there that Getty has, presidential autographs, all that. But I noticed on the video, Getty's there and, he's got his thing going on. He's talking about, baseball and I looked on the floor, the 1993 All-Star Game bag that all the players got, the gift
Yeah.
bag. It's sitting there. I saw the logo. It's right in his room. He keeps the 1993 All-Star Game close. And I know you do too. You don't get to pitch many All-Star games, right?
Well, that was my favorite memory from All-Star games because my first All-Star game was in San Diego. Second one was there in Baltimore, and that was the year I think after the stadium had opened up. And then in '96, my All-Star appearance was in Philadelphia, and I got a pitch in the Baltimore game and did well. I think I had three up, three down. I remember striking out Darren Dalton, so that was something that was always memorable. But the All-Star game in San Diego, it was a blowout. AL won big, and in the '96 All Star game in Philly, it was a blowout. The National League won big. That was a Mike Piazza showcase event there for him. But yeah, great memories from that '93 All Star game. I remember how hot it was too. Remember how hot it was that week during the
All
All
of it, just
Star week?
all of it. I mean, all of it. And it's still legendary 32 years later with Griffey hitting the wall, Gonzalez with the home run, John Kruk and Randy Johnson. Like they just had a lot of Free Willy out on the outfield, had a lot of memories, and even for Messina here and Cito Gaston. But I think back, man, it's been 32 years. How crazy is that? And here's the difference. You're in Kansas City. You've had a parade, a rather large one. We have not had a parade here yet. And I don't know if franchises do parades over 500 finishes or wherever you are in Kansas City, because you're in that sort of never land of, but you're in a different division there. Man, the baseball thing here, Monty, it got good again, right? We're bad. We're so bad. We're good. We're drafting Rutschman. We're drafting all these guys. Henderson's coming on. And this year has been such an incredible thud for the fan base here for the offseason. It's been nice having Trevor Rogers and getting Kyle Bradish back the last couple of weeks, but there's nothing worse than being sort of mediocre in baseball, right?
Well, you want to be relevant during the last month of the season, and then things end early. Obviously, you have to let your manager go. You make some changes, and that's a dramatic change. And I think that there's a ripple down effect whenever that occurs, and it's just hard for a team to get the traction they need because, I mean, you can really kind of be seemingly out of things and going into say the All-Star break, if you're around 500 around the All-Star break, you still have some life left in you. You know what I'm saying? You still have the ability to turn around. But I mean, I use Baltimore as an example numerous times, how they turned things around 3 or 4 years ago, 100 plus loss season, and turned things around. And I think Rutschman had so much to do with that. What he was able to do, not just with his bat, but what he was able to do with that pitching staff really made a huge difference. And this thing goes in such cycles, and we see the ups and the downs. And unless you're say an LA or a New York, or, or maybe even the Cubbies, and you just have to look at the markets and what the abilities are to put together that payroll that you have to really be relevant and have a chance of going deep into a postseason.
Well, so you mentioned that because I've been to one baseball game this year that wasn't opening day. Last week, Janet Marie Smith made me her guest at Dodger Stadium. I was there the day that Kershaw announced his retirement. I saw him play the Giants. Saw Yamamoto pitch at Chavez Ravine, which is a lovely, my favorite place. Chavez Ravine, second favorite, your stadium, but I haven't been there since it's been completely remodeled. But I've always loved Royal Stadium as well. I guess for being in a place where you smell the money, you smell Dodger bigness when I go to Yankee Stadium. I don't smell that in Kansas City. I don't smell that in Pittsburgh. I don't smell it in Cleveland. I don't smell it in Baltimore. A lot of these places have to get things so right. And Rutschman felt right when they're winning 101 games this time 2 years ago, and everybody was sort of coming along, and they had all these prospects in the wings. Now Kowser's up, and he's hitting Mendoza. Now Kobe Mayo looks like Kingman without the power. Westberg's been injured a lot. Gunnar Henderson looks like a star, but man, I don't know where all of this is. And Rutschman has really withered along with injuries and some other things. And the Bobby Witt Rutschman thing here seems to be eternal, and it will be a measurement here that the Orioles may have gotten that one wrong.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to say. I mean, Bobby Witt Jr. is an outstanding talent. I mean, if I'm going to start a baseball team, he may be the one guy that I'd say, give me him as my first pick just because of all the things he can do. And he's 25 years old and he can go out and do a lot of things to help you win a baseball game. But we saw Bobby Witt Jr. in 2024 have an MVP type season. Judge won the MVP. Bobby Witt Jr. was not the same player this season as he was last year. Still put up really, really good numbers. I mean, he would be, you put up well above average numbers for any player, any position, but his defense is incredible. But I just don't think you can expect players to go, say 15 to 20 years of a career and not have some little blips on the radar where you say, gosh, how long can we count on this? But I think the great players find ways to rebound, find ways to recover, get back to where they need to be at some point. I think Rutschman will do that.
Well, it's been a decade now since the Kansas City Baltimore baseball wars. It's kind of crazy how fast time goes. Perez still a part of this. And I go back to Hosmer and, at that point in time, that inflection point, Moustakas, where who are you keeping? Who are you not keeping? The Dodgers don't have to worry about that. Certain places they don't worry about that. Certainly for the Orioles, it was give Rutschman 500 million. No. Give Henderson. Well, the Boris is the agent. We can't give. Well, maybe Messiah will take our money. 8 at-bats into his career will take $80 million. And we have new owners here that are really, that's an Amici's lunch for you and me off the air to talk about the new ownership here and how my Caucasian employee has a press credential and the Hispanic guy named Aparicio doesn't. But in a general sense, picking the right players, and I look all these years later and look up at Perez and say, well, somebody you chose wisely in certain ways there, but that was the hardest thing to do after you won, was knowing there wasn't necessarily going to be the kind of money necessary to support a $200 million payroll in Kansas City.
Yeah, and the big thing that happened was the Royals went 29 years from the 1985 World Series to getting into the wild card, and they made it in that wild card in 2014. They go to the World Series. They lose in the seventh game of the World Series. They go back in 15 to really kind of go wire to wire that whole year. And they had some great players and players like the Lorenzo Canes and the Alcides Escobar and Eric Hosmer, and Mike Moustakas, Alex Gordons. You had so many of those players that really kind of hit free agency all at one time. And the Royals front office, Dayton Moore, who was the general manager at that time, said, look, this organization, this fan base has waited 29 years for postseason. We finally got there. We finally got to the top of the hill. We won the World Series. And I know these players have value. We can trade and we can just say, hey, we're done. We won a World Series. We're finished. And we can get some nice prospects for these players who are going to be hitting free agency all about the same time. We had four guys in one season that were going to hit free agency. He elected to try to go for it one more time. For the fans of the Kansas City Royals, it did not work out. They kind of ran out of gas at the end of that 2016 season, just didn't get there. And that was really the time that you could have traded and got some tremendous value from those players who were all going to be hitting free agency. They didn't do it. They were highly criticized. Unfortunately, Dayton Moore probably lost his job over something similar to that situation because our new owner decided, hey, we want more transactional. We want to see. We love loyalty. We love it when we buy into our players, but we need we need more transactional type of a general manager. JJ Picola took over as general manager, and he's been exactly that. He's been much more transactional, and still has that attachment to the players. But I think everybody understands you can't just kind of stay with these same group of players beyond their prime. Once they hit it and you have a chance to move them, it might be time to do it because of the dollars involved. And most markets don't have the ability to write a whole bunch of several $100 million checks at one time.
Jeff Montgomery is our guest. He was a great relief pitcher in Major League Baseball for the Kansas City Royals. He has been involved in their broadcast, been involved in Kansas City media since the day he took me out and said, I'm getting a radio station. This is before I had my radio station. I'm 27 years in. How long have you had the station?
Gosh, I think it was 1997 is when we
I was 98. You were before me.
We did our first station in 97. I was still playing, and I made the decision to invest in sports radio because Kansas City was the largest market in the United States that did not have a full-time sports radio station. We had sports on an AM station from 3 in the afternoon to 6. That was the only sports on the radio in Kansas City. And that was my reasoning for making that investment, and still going strong after all these years.
Yes, me too. And, I've moved to Baltimore Positive. I do all sorts of community things and food things and community, just get out because I can't do sports all day, every day at 57. And I think it got mean and it got ridiculous. I mean, in a general sense, I was never, as you know, as our friendship of 3.5 decades goes back, I was never a fire the coach, bury the player kind of guy. I think being around it gave me a different kind of respect for injuries and tough times and mental challenges and how hard the game is. Certainly the game of baseball on a daily basis. And then football came here, right around the 96, 97. And I saw what real injuries look like, gruesome injuries look like, and head trauma. Having Tony Saragusa tell me he loved me because he got hit in the head during the game. So I've seen the other part of athletics, but I've also seen the challenges baseball's had. And, I've waited decades for Mr. Angelos to either move on or move the team. We have a new owner here. They have a nice base of young talent. They have a general manager who is at least capable of identifying talent. What would you say from the outside of whatever this implosion was here this year, Monty, where they went from, I think the over-under was like 90, 91 and a half on them in the beginning of the year, to 89 to they're 18 games out of first place. I mean, it really happened fast and furious in April and May, and they never got their footing here. And I've been at this 57 years. I go back to like 72 as an Oriole fan. We're talking about Big Cat Williams and deals, and we lost Davey Johnson. I remember when he was an Oriole. That's how far back I go as a player. When he was dealt to the Atlanta Braves. I don't remember a year like this, Monty, and I've been on the air here for 35 years. I've been in media here 41 years. I don't remember a year with promise like they had here, and just seen it just go away. And it's been a devastating thing financially for the franchise. First time buyers this year who bought into new ownership because they wanted nothing to do with the old ownership. Now there's a queasiness in the marketplace here. And I don't mean 1 and 2 for the football team. That makes the football team even worse because there's such hope getting to this Kansas City Chiefs game this week with you. But I don't know where the hope is in the offseason here that they're going to spend money, buy pitching, make good decisions, or that any of their young players really look like they're ascending right now.
Yeah, I mean, to put it in a nutshell, to me, it all boils down to starting pitching. I mean, if you've got a rotation that can give you a chance to win every time you go out there, then you're going to have a good season. And if you lose players due to injury, you lose players due to free agency that maybe were factored in maybe from a year ago or a few years back that are you're going to count on for those 30 plus starts, for those quality starts are going to give you a great chance to win a baseball game. I mean, Baltimore's always been a great place for hitters. Now it's changed dramatically once they moved that left field wall back. I mean, it really did change things dramatically for the hitters, in my opinion, because I just remember shagging fly balls during batting practice in Camden Yards, and how far those balls would get out of the ballpark. And it was just such a hitter friendly venue. But I think starting pitching really is the key. I'll use an example here in Kansas City this year. We had our opening day pitcher go down. We had our all-star pitcher and Chris Pubich go down. We lost our American League Cy Young runner-up from last year, Seth Lugo. So you lose Reagans, Bubich, and Lugo. And last year, our starting rotation started 93% of the games. Okay, 151 games they started last year, the 5 that started the season in rotation. This year wasn't even close to that. So it's just so difficult when you don't have that deep system in order to cover those injuries. And you can bring guys in from outside, or you can bring guys up from the system. But when you're losing Cy Young caliber pitchers, then you've lost a lot. And I think Orioles, with regards to the injuries, losing a Corbin Burns, players like that, it certainly is impactful when you don't have those guys to count on.
Jeff Montgomery is our guest. He's out in Kansas City. I actually called him to talk football. He's like, I haven't watched any football yet. We don't watch Chiefs till the Royals are over around here. And they're 1 and 2, and they might be 1 and somebody can be 1 and 3 by the end of the day. I got to talk arms with you, man. I don't know that. And sometimes they get you in the middle of the season and you're all frenetic and you're getting off a plane from Chicago coming into Baltimore and we're trying to talk about games. And when a team stinks, I don't even bother you in the middle of the year because there was no ongoing conversation about anything pennant related here this year. And for 5 years, from 17 through 23, really, I mean, when you're out of it, you're out of it. And the baseball thing here has been a mess. But once you start to sniff where it is, you get back into well, the shifts have changed and the clock has changed. All of this stuff that didn't exist even in 14, 15 when we were battling you in American League Championship Series. I look at the game now and I see the pitchers and I see the arms falling off. And I've been with Bradish now long enough to see his arm fall off twice, surgery, this, that, back. Now he's back. Now he's going to be an opening day starter and a Cy Young candidate again. I need to know. I had Leo Mazzoni on this summer. He had a more old-fashioned thought about it than you, I'm sure, even. But the way you became a major league pitcher, the way you became an all-star reliever, the way you fed your family, the way you stayed healthy was feeding your family. It wasn't max effort. I'm going to throw my arm out when I'm 26 and not be able to pitch when I'm 32 or 33, make some money. The advice these kids get, the year-round, all of that. And I talk to many of you. I keep contact with pitchers and even guys like Dave Johnson, whose kid Steve pitched in the modern era, and people I know who Palmer came up to me this summer and talked pitching with me and talked about injuries and all this stuff, and he's on the broadcast every night. There's so many ways of looking at this, but whatever they're doing now is the wrong way. I mean, when everybody's getting hurt, I'm wondering who's keeping an eye on these kids, man.
Well, unfortunately, I think it starts with the kids. I think it starts when kids are in their teens and parents are running them to baseball academies, trying to get them velocity. They're trying to learn velocity at too young of an age. I mean, when you're 14 or 15 years old and you're trying to throw a baseball 82 miles an hour, because you want to get a scholarship or you want to have a chance to be drafted. To me, it's just too much. And I think I had a doctor describe it to me this one time. He goes, Monty, there's so much tread on the tire. The harder you run your tire, the faster it's going to wear out. And that's what they're doing with these kids at a young age. Year-round baseball, very rarely do you see a tremendous athlete who plays three sports anymore, where it's a football, basketball, baseball, thing that a lot of athletes like myself did, where you're allowing that arm to rest for 6 or 7 months out of the year, and then you're playing baseball for the balance of the time. But then you get to the professional level, and even at the college level, before players are drafted, you've got so many ways to measure pitches, whether it be velocity or it be spin, angles, so many different ways to measure. And I think the kind of the intricacies of that have created an environment in which players expose the health of their arm. And it's all about spin. It's all about max effort. It's all about velocity. And when you're doing that, a big part of the year, you're just going to wear yourself down. You're going to wear yourself out. And that's the thing that I think has happened starting at a younger age with the amateur players all the way through, the professional ranks. And I saw a study once that Tom Verducci from Sports Illustrated put together, a tremendous article about the players who were having Tommy John. And this article goes back a number of years, so it's even worse now, I'm sure. But the amount of players that had Tommy John surgery, the lion's share of those players were American-born players. And his reasoning after doing a tremendous amount of research was this, that the Latin American players are allowed to kind of grow into their velocity. In other words, they're not on a radar gun or they're not on a Hawkeye system, when they're 14 years old because they're
Nor
in a
were you,
sandlot.
right, in your era.
No,
No,
no, no,
right.
not at all.
You've
They were
seen this come this century, really, in the last 15, 20 years,
20 years
where
probably.
it's a medical experiment for every kid who's got readouts and science, where what you had was, hey, did you have fun today? How'd you throw?
Right.
Right? Literally,
Yep.
right?
Well, and the other thing is like, people say, how many games you play when you're a kid? Well, I said, I probably played 15 to 20 in the summer in a uniform with a umpire, but I probably played 70 games a month in the sandlot. I played a whole lot more baseball than the kids do now today, but it wasn't the big focus on how hard can you throw, how many guys can you strike out, how many bats can you miss. As I felt like learning how to pitch, truly learning how to pitch, not throw, but pitch was the key to me having success in baseball.
And that was what part of the artistry? It wasn't doing it too much, too hard, too often, right?
No, that's the ability to command the baseball down in the strike zone, changing speeds, identifying hitters' strengths and weaknesses, reading the swing. When a player makes a swing during the course of an at bat, was he on that pitch? Was he not on that pitch? Maybe I need to change speeds. Maybe I need to change location. All those things that come into play, to me, nowadays, unfortunately, are not on the player himself. They're on the analytics. They're on all of the preparation. They're on all the reports and the scouting and the things that they get with regards to the weakness of the hitter. Okay, so now as a pitcher, I'm now trying to pitch to that hitter's weakness, which is fine, but that may not be my strength. And I think players get too plugged into the game plan and not able to adjust on the fly in the middle of a count during an at bat. I think the pitchers just, in fact, this was interesting. We were playing a couple of years ago, we were playing the Toronto Blue Jays, and a pitcher came in from the bullpen, and he takes his hat off and then looks down at a little scouting report in his hat. And he calls a pitching coach out, right? He had the wrong scouting report in his hat. He couldn't pitch because he had the wrong scouting report in his hat. They had to call out the bat boy to bring him the right scouting report for him to put that into his hat and be able to make the pitches. He just didn't have the ability on his own to stand on the middle of a major league mound and pitch to a hitter. And I was like, this is where we've gotten to, where the hitters or where the pitchers are so reliant on someone else telling them how to do their job. And so there are just so many things that have changed. A lot of it for good. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think a lot of the stuff's really good they've done in baseball. I think the game's so much more interesting. The pitch clock has been tremendous, in my opinion, as far as how it's improved the pace of the game, the interest of the game. But there are a lot of things, in my opinion, too, that the analytics have driven the game in a bad direction, injury wise,
Every
particularly.
old guy like you and me looks at it and says, analytics, I mean, great, but have they improved the game? And I'm going to, last thing for you, because I know you were a player rep, and I think it's really important to talk about this because I'm not the boogeyman and I am Baltimore positive, not negative, but I sat through your strike.
All right.
And Camden Yards empty and the streak and all of that stuff. My dad canceled the Sporting News in '81 from the first strike. He was so pissed at baseball he didn't know what to do. So he's like, no box scores, no Sporting News. So 44 years later, I still bring that one up. Next year, the labor situation and the imbalance of revenues and haves and have-nots in the game, and as you know, as a media mogul that you are, hey, by the way, two FCC licensees here together today. Two guys, two regular guys. You're less regular than me, but I would say, like, that's very unusual that we're not named Clear Channel or Odyssey or any of that stuff, and we actually own FCC licenses. But from a media perspective, and you understand this as well as anyone, you made a lot of money playing baseball and follow it, where regional sports is and where streaming is and where old white people are or are not watching baseball, or how young people haven't really caught on to it in so many ways, and who's going to pay for it and how we're going to access it streaming wise here. There's a lot of questions about revenue in baseball, where it's going, where the future is, not to mention arms and pitching, but just finding what the new business model is for Major League Baseball, because I bring it up with lots of people and no one's really good at explaining it to me. And I know smart people.
Yeah, unfortunately, I would not want to be the one that has to figure out that Rubik's cube once uh, the basic agreement expires after next season, and what's going to happen with regards to the collective bargaining. Where's that going to go or not go? Who knows what that's going to lead to? But there's already a lot of maybe hints or indications that the owners once again are going to fight pretty hard to get a salary cap in baseball, which yes, it works dramatically different in other sports with regards to the cap and the revenue sharing. With regards to media, the NFL, they are fortunate. They've got it right. The NFL, with how NFL runs all of the television rights through Central, and everyone is treated somewhat equally with regards to that. Baseball will, to me, it'll be very difficult to get to that. And I think with regards to the negotiation with the collective bargaining players and owners, and one thing I remember vividly from the 94-95 strike when I was our player rep here in Kansas City is that we asked for, the owners were asking for a cap, essentially, is what they were asking for. And we were asking for numbers. And Major League Baseball owners are protected by antitrust laws. They don't have to disclose their numbers. Only industry in America that is protected from sharing, their true numbers, their books. And we couldn't get any cooperation on owners sharing books. And when you start talking about a partnership, I mean, I think that's one thing that is going to happen at some point. If there's ever going to be a partnership between the players and the owners to where they will share revenues or do whatever it's going to be in caps, that there has to be a feeling that we're on the same page and we're working together, and it's not us against you. It's some kind of a unified motion. But I think it's going to be a really, really complicated situation coming up at the next season.
As an old-time player you are, and you're not even an old-time player, that would be the Brooks Robinsons and the people that, Brian McRae's father, reserve clause people. You had it pretty good during your day, but I dug in and you guys were in it together, and a flying middle finger to then multimillionaires, not billionaires and corporations that were involved. I had Charlie Finley's daughter on a couple weeks ago. So yeah, I go back to that era and remember those fights. It was a dug in, unified thing that started with Curt Flood and everyone black and white and Hispanic and right-handed and left-handed and pitcher and catcher, and just all the way through what Marvin Miller and then Don Fear in your era brought people together to fight. I don't know what the fight is in baseball when I see empty stadiums. I see these regional sports networks. I don't know where that fight for revenue is. I just know it's $20 for a beer when I go to the stadium. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering whether, where the value proposition is for Mr. Rubenstein, Katie Griggs, the people that are running the Orioles. I can't blame anything on Peter, John Angelos anymore. I don't have any of that. Where are you now? And am I invited? I'm 50. Do I want to participate in this or not? As an
Right.
Aparicio, Getty Lee, friend of the All-Star pitchers, media member, FCC owner, all of that. Tell me where I'm supposed to stand, Major League Baseball and the Orioles. And I think this time next year, I remember the wars from your era. I don't know how dug in the players are to stick together. I think that's going to be for you and guys of your era to say, hey, don't roll over. These guys are really rich. Don't roll over.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting because I don't think there are any players active today who are going to be going through this experience, such as the we essentially went through us every time there was collective bargaining. They did have that small lockout a couple of years ago, but it was not a thing where you're digging in and fighting over something more critical. Like, are you trying to preserve the system as you have it now? That players like myself missed part of '94, a World Series in '95 for. And by the way, I had a chance to be together with Johnny Bench a few years ago, and Johnny Bench is one of my favorite players of all time. Growing up and as a Cincinnati Reds fan, and I was at Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia. Johnny was speaking there, and I was there for an event as well. And I went up to Johnny and I shook his hand. I looked him in the eye and I shook his hand. I said, Johnny, I said, I want to thank you for all that you and your players went through for the system that I had the opportunity to enjoy. And he stood up out of his chair and he looked at me and said, Monty, he goes, no one has ever said that to me. Thank you very much. I just don't know that there's an appreciation, from especially today's players who are really, really doing well financially. I don't know if there's appreciation for what guys like Johnny Bench did and Brooks Robinson did back in the day when they had to dig in their claws and fight for the system.
I want you to know that I was in El Segundo last week, and it wasn't to visit Jim Harbaugh or Ortiz or even Herbert. I went to George Brett's Field in El Segundo because I'm old school. I would get my bobblehead out, but I got to put away. You know what? It's for George Brett. But I mean, it's people of your era that would be able to stand up and say, "Hey, Gunnar Henderson. Hey, Adley Rutschman. Or don't roll over for these billion. These guys are even richer than the era that you had.
Oh
In
yeah.
regard to
Yeah.
how much money the actual owners have and what their level of interest and investment when we put $600 million into the stadium as taxpayers to basically take the Jim Henneman press box and put it in left field. So I mean, literally, I've watched all of this happen now on my watch over all these years. Jeff Montgomery, I'm going to let him get back to doing what he does, owning WHB, monitoring all things Royals. And by the way, watch your football team. You own a
I'm going to
sports
start
radio.
watching this week.
Start
I'm going to start
replay.
watching.
We're coming out.
I
Start
know.
watching this week.
It's interesting. I was looking at the Lamar Jackson's numbers, like 11 TDs, no interceptions, but the defense can't stop anybody, right? The defense is having some troubles.
There's a lot of Matabike, Namde Matabike, big defensive tackle, gets after the quarterback, a sacking defensive tackle. Neck problem. It sounds not real good in a lot of ways. It's been a little quiet earlier in the week. Didn't play. Probably going to play this week. Huge problems in stopping the run. Huge problems without a pass rush and Kyle Van Noy. And I think that's what really did him in against Jared Goff on Monday night. Short week, dude. I know you got I know you got a tea time. I know you well enough to know you're going to be out on the golf course. I feel like such a jerk, with this whole Ravens thing. And me, I used to be a media member. Now I'm not because these people say I'm not. I missed the barbecue. I missed just coming out and hanging out with you guys and eating some barbecue this week. But I'll be watching from here as Arrowhead rains down on Lamar and we see Mahomes and Lamar do their thing. I'll see you next year. We'll get some barbecue out in Kansas City. All right.
Sounds great. Take care of yourself.
Love Jeff Montgomery. I wore my special Major League Baseball shirt from. I still have the clipping of Monty wearing my Get Nasty shirt in the Kansas City Star on some treadmill in some story that he sent me from 1996. I am Nestor. We are WNST AM 1570 Towson, Baltimore. I still want to go to Kansas City this week. Don't I start talking to guys like you? It makes me want the barbecue. Baltimore positive. Hang in there. Game time's at 4:00.